Today is the yard site of two very famous people, the Netziv, and it's also the yard site of Avram Ham HaKohen. And the legend has it that when the Netziv was a child, he was not successful in learning. And one day he heard his parents talking to the cobbler and discussing the cobbler should take their son, who wasn't matzliach in learning, under his wing, at least to teach him a trade. And the son heard this. Maybe he was in bed and he heard the parents talking at night. He came out and he said, "Parents, please let me stay learning. I'll promise I'll apply myself and I'll be matzliach." And sure enough, that's what happened. It's also the yorkshire of Avram HaKohen Pam. He was a Rashiv of Teradas. And I just like always sharing one story that shows how humble he was. He once called Moshe Reichlin to speak to him. And the secretary answered the phone and asked Rav Pam, "Who may I say is calling?" So Rav Pam tells the secretary, "Tell Mr. Reichman that Rav Pam's father is on the phone." That's what a humble person he was. Okay, let us get started. The beautiful Mumazach. Ha'isha niknis b'shloisha drach. A woman could be niknis to her husband in three ways. But she's koine herself with two drachim. Niknis b'kesef b'shtar u'b'biyah. She becomes niknis to her husband with kesef shtar u'b'biyah. And Rashi says, what are these things? B'kesef b'shtar mefarish b'brayis of the Gemara. Nois no kesef ashava kesef. The husband either gives her kesef or something that has value. He tells her shtar. He writes on the paper, even if the paper has zero value, so there's no shava kesef that he's giving to her. If he writes on the shtar and then gives it to her, she becomes mikudeshes. Bia is bala. The Amar Skacheli Bibiyasu. The Chulu Yalaf Mikroi, and we are going to learn each of these methods from Sukkim. Taima de Beshamai Mefarish Gemara. The reasoning for Beshamai, who's about to tell us that you need a Shavah dinner, the Gemara later on will tell us. Zaktamor Bekesef. How much kesef is required? Beshamai Yomer Bedinner, Ubeshavah dinner. It has to be a dinner, which is significantly more than a Shavah Pruta. Beis Hillel Oimrim, the Pruta Ubeshava Pruta. That would be enough. Rashi tells us the Pruta is a Pruta Shalom Chayshes, like a penny. How much is a Pruta? The Chamahi Pruta, Achat Mishmoina Be'isser Hertal. It's 1/8 of a certain type of silver coin that was, I guess, common in the times of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is telling us that the value of a Pruta is 1/8 the value of an Isser Hertal. The kindness atma, if a woman wants to leave her marriage, she could be kind herself beget if her husband gives her a get, or if a abal, or if her husband passes away. Hayavama niknis. What about a yavama? How is a yavim kind yavama? The bia. He could only be kind to her with one method, the method dictated in the Torah, which is bia. Now, once he makes that bia, she's an eshesh for all purposes, and therefore the same two heterim that apply to an eshesh, which is get or mises abal, would apply to her. But what if she didn't make yibum and she only has a zika, which is being mechayev her to marry the oven? How does she free herself from that? The chalita will terminate that zika, or if the oven dies, then there is no one for her to have a zika with. But isha niknis. Niknis means she's purchased. That's a little bit of an unusual lashon to use when we're talking about a marriage. Why here at the beginning of the parak, the Tanya uses the word niknis to describe matrimony? Later on in the parak, I think the beginning of the second parak, the Torah, the Mishnah says ha'ish mikadesh, and the usual lashon of Kiddushin. Zok Gemara, the reason why we used over here a lashon of kinyan is because of kinyan kesef, Kiddushin kesef. Mishum de kaboy lemisnei kesef. One of the ways with which someone is mekalish a lady is with kesef. The kesef minola. How do we know that there is a possibility to be kind of a woman of kesef? Because gomar kicha mistayafrein. We learn in Xer Shava the word kicha from stay Ephraim, where Avram Avinu brought Ma'aris Anachpela from Ephraim. Ksiv hacha ki yigach ish isha, which is referring to ishas as the lashon of kicha. Uchsifatam nasati kesef asoda kach mimeni. So there's a lashon of kicha being used to indicate a sale of a property. The kicha ikri kinyan. We know that the word kicha used by the stada is a good kinyan, and it's referred to as well as a kinyan. Let's see Rashi. Mishum de kabayla misne kesef. Bahani kinyanim, amongst the kinyanim that the Tana is telling us are effective to marry a woman, kesef is one of them. Barmino lekamon, kesef minola, the nickness boy. How do we know that someone can be kind of a woman with kesef? Mufarshinon, and the Gemara answers, the gamrinon kicha mistei Ephraim. We learn it with Xer Shava from the word kicha from stay Ephraim, where there the kesef purchased the property. The kinyan. That's why we're using the expression of kinyan in respect of the kinyan kesef, or the Kiddushin kesef, which is also referred to as a kinyan. The kesef minalam zog Rashi lav hacha kaboila. Here we're just quoting the question of the kesef minalam discussed elsewhere. We're just quoting that Gemara here. Elul Kaman is where the Gemara is really looking for the source that kinyan kesef works for Kiddushin. The Mataritz, who's trying to explain why our Tana used the lashon nickness, brings down, quotes the entire discussion where the Gemara discusses kinyan kesef. Because he wanted to get to the part of kesef. The kesef minola yalfinu lekamon nikicha kicha. So over here, the focus of our Gemara is not to tell us why kesef works; it's to use that discussion to show us why the Tana here used a lashon of kinyan. Inami, we have another place where we see that the purchase of a field is not only referred to with the word kicha, but also referred to with the word kinyan. Inami sadois bakesef yikti. Sadois kesef one can buy. Beautiful. Therefore, Tanya Ishanik. That's why over here our Mishnah uses the expression of Ishanik. Frankly, that's a beautiful idea. That's a beautiful idea. Why didn't the Gemara follow through with the same idea in later Mishnahs? V'nisni hasam ha'ish kaina. Why does the Mishnah say later ha'ish mikadesh? Why doesn't the Mishnah say ha'ish kaina? Why don't we always use the word kinyan to describe Kiddushin? Dr. Rashi, the Tani belishna derabanan ha'ish mikadesh. I'm sorry, this is a Rashi on later. I apologize. Look, tomorrow, Meikara Tani lishna deraisa. First, the Tana wanted to express marriage using the deraisidic term, which is nickness, ula b'soif. But then the Tana wants to tell us how we refer to a marriage. Ula b'soif Tani lishna derabanan, which is Kiddushin. Umay lishna derabanan. Where does the lashon Kiddushin come from? Why do we refer to a marriage as a Kiddushin? Just like when you're makdish something, it now makes this something author to everybody. So too, if someone is mekadosh a woman, she now becomes author to everybody. Gewaltig. Zog the head of the Gemara. Umay v'nisni hacha ish kanya. Now we're focusing on why is our Mishnah talking about this marriage from the perspective of the woman, ha'isha nickness. Why don't we discuss the same Kiddushin, but talk about it from the perspective of the man? Just like later on, instead of ish mikadesh, it's talking about the man making the kinyan. Why is it here the Mishnah discussing it from the perspective of the woman? The Gemara, because mishum de kaboy lemisni hacha, mishum de kaboy lemisni seifa, the seifa of our Mishnah talks about Hashish Kaina herself. The koine es atzma, and that's v'didah. When she's being koine herself back, now we're talking about her getting something. So since we're talking about her in the Seifa, when we're discussing her retrieving her control over herself, therefore, Tana Nami Reisha B'Didah, we express the case of when she becomes Mikudeshes from her point of view. Frank the Gemara, the V'nisni Ha'ish Kaina Umakta. Why didn't the later Gemara, instead of saying Ish Mekadesh, why didn't it say Ha'ish Kaina Umakta? The Gemara, Mishum, the Ika, in other words, the Gemara is asking, why doesn't it say our Mishnah also, both the Reisha and the Seifa, with the perspective of the husband? It could say Ish Kaina Umakna. Instead of saying Ha'isha Niknis, the Kaina is Atzma, it could have still said everything from the perspective of the man. Ha'ish Kaina Umakna. As Rashi says, Kiechi the Tani Belisha Derabban and Ish Mekadesh. Dr. Gemara Mishum the Ika Mises Abal, the Lav Iu Kamakna. There's one release from the marriage that is not the Baal. If he gives her a get, we can say he's being makna herself back to herself. But when he dies, he's not doing anything at all. It's min shemaya hu de kamakna. So therefore, the Gemara doesn't want, the Mishnah, the Tanya doesn't want to use a lashon of ha'ish koina umakna because that would not accurately describe his death. But isha koinas atzma, when her husband dies, that is an accurate depiction of what's happening. Itana kaina, if it would have used in our Mishnah lashon of a ish kaina, havamina, I would have thought afilu bal karcha. It would make it sound that everything is completely in the control of the husband. Ish kaina, he can be kaina whatever he wants. But we know that's not true. We know a woman has to be maskim to the Kiddushin. So therefore, it's a isha niknis, tana isha niknis, to tell us that she needs to be part of the niknis. The midaitain shaloi midaital. If she wouldn't want to get married, she doesn't want to accept the Kiddushin, he cannot force it. So you see how the Tana was very sensitive to the nuances of what the connotations of his wording is, and he wanted to pick wording that would be just perfect. Now, for those of us who know diktuk, I'm not from that group. Shalosh is something that's normally describing something that's a lashon nekeva. It's a feminine tense. Shloisha is a male tense. We're speaking about methods with which a woman becomes nickness to her husband. So, Frank the Gemara, my area to tell you shalosh, listni shloisha. Why didn't we use the male tense version of these items, these kinyonim? Dr. Mar, the answer is mishum tekaboy lemisni derech. It says ha'isha niknes b'shloisha derachim. Right? I believe that is the lashon of the Mishnah. Ha'isha niknes b'shloisha derachim in 3 ways, using the word derech v'derech lashon nekevi. Derech is a feminine lashon. Tichsiv v'idata lahem es haderech yelchu ba. Ba's lashon nekeva. So when we're talking about the derech haTorah that Moshe Rabbeinu needs to teach Klal Yisrael, it refers to the derech with a lashon ba, a lashon of nekeva. So too over here, we're using the word derech. We're going to use it with a lashon nekeva. Correct the Gemara. That's not so simple. I'm going to show you an example of derech that has a lashon zachar. V'laha the Tanya b'shiva derachim boitkin es hazav. There are 7 ways that were boidik hazav. A female zava, no matter why she's tadam, she's going to be tummy. But a male zav, a male who out on a mission, it's only metamahim if it's an emission that came by itself. If it was caused because of things that he ate or actions that he took, that's not ziva. Because of that, when a man sees ziva, we need to rule out the possibility that the ziva was caused by a natural trigger, and if it was, then he wouldn't be tummy. So it says shiva drachim boitkiness is up. Now, if you're going to say that derech is lashon nekeva, nisni v'sheva derachim, not v'shiv'ah derachim, because sheva is lashon nekeva. Shiva is lashon zachar. Mishum de kaboy lumisni derech. What is the reason why it uses the word shiva, not shiva? Because it wants to use the word derech. The ashkan derech nikri lashon zachar, and derech in fact is not lashon nekeva, like our Gemara says, because the idata mohemet derech yelchuva. Rather, we'll show you that the word derech is a female gendered. Tichsiv b'derech echad is lashon zachar. Yotzoi lecha uv'shiva, which is lashon zachar. Derachim yanuz b'lefanach. They're going to attack us from one direction, but we're going to cause them such fear that they're going to scatter in 7 different directions. Correct the Gemara. Ihachi kashu kra adodi, the kashu nami masnitna adodi. So now we have a contradiction in the psukim. Is derech halashon zachar or is derech halashon nekeva? And we have the same contradiction in the Mishnayos. Is derech halashon zachar like is depicted in the Bryce of Shiva Drachim Boitkin Esasov, or is derech halashon nekeva like Isha Niknis Ishloisha Derach? Zok Gemara, not a problem. Kroy adadi loy kashu. The psukim are not a contradiction, because depending on what the pasuk is referring to, that would dictate if it's a lashon zachar or a lashon nekeva. So let's think. Hacha de b'toyrakoi. When it says v'data le'emes haderech, it's talking about teaching people Torah. The Torah ikri lashon nekeva. Torah is referred to in a feminine tense. And where do we see that? The chsiv Torah Hashem tamima lashon nekeva mishivas nafesh. So since we're talking about the derech haTorah, the derech haTorah actually takes on a feminine form. Therefore, because of law, the lashon nekeva. But Hasam, when you're talking about derech echad, they're going to come attack you, yetei lecha, and then they're going to scatter in 7 derachim. We're speaking about a war. Hasam de b'machamakai. Who fights wars? Who's coming against you? The darker shall ish lasos mulchama. These people that the pasuk are discussing are males. So therefore, the darker shall isha lasos mulchama. Therefore, when you're speaking about the derech hamulchama, pasuk lo b'lashon zachar. Masnitna dadi lakashim, and you still have a kash on the Mishnah. Why would the Tana in one place by Kiddushin use derech as a lashon nekeva, while in the Brayta talking about zov, the Mishnah talks about, or the Brayta talks about lashon zachar? Why? Here we're talking about a isha niknis. We're speaking about a woman. It's logical that this should be expressed for lashon nekeva. But hasab over there, when we're talking about ziva, the darko shall ishli body. Only a male who has an emission has to be checked to verify that this wasn't caused by a trigger. Then darko shall ishli body. You never check a woman who saw ziva why she saw the ziva, because she's tummy regardless. So isha nami ba'onis mitama. An isha would be tummy even if the ziva came machmasonis. Therefore, tani lashon zachar. Okay, so let's stop for a minute and let's have a look in Rashi, who elaborates a little bit on the price of the Shiva Dachim Voitkim Esasav. And Rashi gives us some detail. What are the 7 tests that you do? The Michael, we see did the Zov eat something that could have triggered this emission? The Mishnah, did he drink anything? The Chayli, does he have some type of ailment? The Masa, did he lift a heavy load? The Kfita, did he jump? Umara, did he see something that was triggering? The hearer, or did he think about something that's triggering? Shema machmas echad mehen ra. Maybe one of these triggers caused him to see ziva, and therefore v'anus, who he's considered an oinus, v'tahar, and he will be tar. The Rachmana Omar, the Torah teaches us in ziva mi b'tharai. It says roar mi b'tharai. The ziva has to just flow from his body without any trigger. Me'elav on its own. However, but Isha, on the other hand, no matter what reason she sees dam, it triggers a tuma. The Amar, the Perik B'nai Hishu Aimer Ki Yosy Zoiv Dama, Hare Einis Amar, the Torah means Einis as well. Okay, beautiful. Let's go weiter in the Gemara. Zog the head of the Gemara, my timer, Tani Shalosh. Mishum Durach. Why did our Mishnah use a lashon nekeva of Shalosh, because the Mishnah wanted to use the word Drach. Why did the Mishnah need to use the word Drachim? Nisni Devarim. It would have been so much simpler if the Mishnah had been Shalosh Shah Devarim Hayishaniknas. It should have said Devarim. The Nisni Shalosh Shah. And then they could have used the Lashon Zachar. One of the Drachim, one of the ways in which a woman can become nicknamed to her husband is through Bia, Ubia Ikri Derech. And Bia is always referred to with the word Derech, the way a man deals with a young girl. In other words, it's referring to Bia. Bia is described as Derech, the way of the world, the way things are done. So Kain Derech Ishim and Ephes, so too is the way of a woman who is adulterous. But you see, in conjunction, when we're talking about Bia, the Torah uses the word Derech. And that's why, since one of the ways to be kind and Isha is Bia, the Tanya decides to use the word Drachim. Dr. Marhatenach Bia. I understand Bia, it's appropriate to use the word Derech for Bia. But Bia is only one of three. Kasav Ushtar Michael Neymar. As the Gemara is going to tell us, do you cater to the one case of Bia and therefore use the word Derech? Or is it more logical to cater to the two, which are more than just the one Bia, Kasav and Shtar, and maybe you should have said Doper. So Kasav and Shtar Michael Neymar. The Gemara Mishum Bia. Since we use the word Derech to accommodate the word Bia, so now that we use the word Derech, we'll use it even for Kesef and Shtar. Is it logical that we should focus and pick the word Derech because of one of the three Kinyonim? Is that logical? No, it's not a problem. Because Hanach Nami Tarech Bianin. Let's not fool ourselves. Why is someone giving Kiddush Kesef? Why is someone giving Kiddush Shtar? Only so that he can be married to this woman and then they can have Bia. So basically, all marriages are about Bia. And therefore, Bia is prominent, and therefore we use the word Derech. The Yisema. Or maybe I can offer you a different story. Hamani Rab Shimoni. This is going according to Rab Shimon. And that's why we use the word Derech, because the Tanya Rab Shimon Aimer, Mipnei Ma Omer Torah, Ki Yikach Ish Isha, V'loi Katav Kisi Lakach Isha Leish. Why do we use the word Yikach Ish Isha as if it's the man who's going to take the wife? Why don't we say that the woman goes out of her way to be taken by a man? It's mashma that the man's role is a dominant role. He has to do the heavy lifting. He has to do the main effort towards getting married. You know why? The derech is that the husband is looking for a wife. It's not the derech of a woman to go look for a husband. Victor, you understand this Gemara? This is a muscle of someone who lost an Aveda. Because Adam lost an Aveda. He lost a rib. He's looking for his rib. He says, I don't have a spare rib. Every rib I have, I need it. So where is my rib? Does the person look for the Aveda, or does the Aveda look for the person? And therefore, since the derech is that the husband looks for the wife, that's why we use the word derech when we're discussing marriage. Developing. Let's see Rashi. My time itani sholish mishum derachim kamrid listening devarim v'nitni shloisha ki yorcha the Gemara, which is how the Gemara normally expresses itself. So the Gemara v'tana tarti mishum chada bitmiya shina lashon kesef ushtar, which should have been davar mishum bia. You should follow the right. Dr. Gemara Hamani the Tani lashon derech b'kedusha. In the second shot of the Gemara, why did we use a lashon derech b'kedusha? Rab Shimoni the Amar ulchar the Aretz shayach buhu. There's a certain derech eretz, the minig of the world when it comes to marriage, and that is the husband looks for the wife aveda achas mitaloisa. He lost one of his rings. Zok the Gemara weiter. We learned in the Mishnah. Zayin Drachim Boitkin Es Hazov. Now let's go back to focus on the Mishnah that we brought earlier regarding this. It says in 7 ways they're Boitik Hazov. That's a male. We already said a male, the Bedika is only relevant to a male. So listen to Dvarim. Why didn't it use the word Dvarim when it came to Azov? Because Dvarim is normally used for a male. What is the Brayshah teaching us, or the Mishnah is teaching us by calling it Drachim, is the Darka, the Milchel Yisera, L'Asir L'Deziva. The Darka, the Mishtaya Yisera, L'Asir L'Deziva. It's usually Derech because the tongue is trying to hint to us that it's the Derech of eating too much to lead to Ziva. It's the Derech of drinking too much to lead to Ziva. It's all about what the normal Derech is. That's why the word Derech is selected in the price in the Mishnah of Zayin Drachim Boit Knesset. Let's look at another Brayshah. Esrik Shavali Ilan. Esrik Shavali Ilan, an Esrik tree is somewhat like a hybrid. It's a tree, but it doesn't have all the halachas of a tree. Esrik Shavali Ilan Begimel Drachim. There's 3 ways, or if they use the word Drachim, there's 3 ways in which an Esrik tree is like any other tree. And the Gemara asked, listen to Dvarim. Why did they use the Racham? Again, it you use the Dvarim. Dr. Gemara, I'll tell you why. Yishum Dabi'inon Masni Seifa. Because the second half of this very same comment is Uli Yerek V'derech Echad. A tree is similar, an esrog tree is similar to a vegetable in one way. Correct the Gemara, Seifa Nami listening to it could have said Uli Yerek V'davar Echad. Why are you saying it used derech in the Reisha? Because of the Seifa should have also used the word davar and not derech. Dr. Gemara, Hasam Hakamash Malon. Once again, there it's telling us what the derech is. What is the normal procedure in raising an esrog tree? The drachel, the esrog, kiyerek. We actually treat and we service the esrog tree like we service vegetables. Ma yerek dakili gadol al kol moyim, just like vegetables, do not rely on rainwater. We actually have to water it and irrigate it over and above what it would get from the rain. And ubishas likitasai isurai. When do you establish what year a vegetable grew in to determine what type of ma'aser you give? Because we know the first and second year you give ma'aser rishon and ma'aser sheni, but the third year there is ma'aser rishon, but there is no ma'aser sheni. Instead of ma'aser sheni, we give ma'aser ani. So we need to know if it's year 1, 2, or 3, or year 4, 5, or 6, because depending on what year it is, that's the type of ma'aser you would take. So a vegetable, you don't care when it grew, when it was planted. You focus on when it was actually harvested, and that will determine what year of ma'aser it's in. Av esrog, so to an esrog tree, unlike regular trees, which can rely just on normal rain, an esrog tree requires additional irrigation. Daki ligadol al kol moyim, and ubishas likitasai isura. An esrog tree, we don't look at when it blossomed. We look at an esrog tree when you pick the esrog off the tree. If you pick the esrog off the tree in a year of ma'aser sheni, then it's going to be a ma'aser sheni. And if you pick the esrog off the tree in a year of ma'aser rishon, then you bring ma'aser rishon. Ma'aser anifa. Every year you do ma'aser rishon. Let's have a look at Rashi. Zok Teleg Rashi. The Gimel Drachim. In what ways, we just discussed in what way an esrog tree is similar to a yerek, and that is b'shas likitasoi isurat. But what are the 3 ways in which an esrog tree is compared to a regular tree? Zok Rashi, Arla, what year of Arla it's in? Urevai, noig b'ki'ilan, or not what year of, I apologize. It's that the halachas of Arla apply to it. But the halachas of Arla don't apply to vegetable, but the halacha of Arla applies to every tree, including an esrog tree. Arla revai noig b'ki'ilan, that's one. Will the Indian Shvius Hochem Beperoisov Acher Hachanata Kiilon Loyachar Lakita Kier? In order for us to determine if the fruits on the tree, if these fruits are fruits of a Shemitah year or fruits of a non-Shemitah year, we look at when it blossoms. So unlike a year where the time of its harvest is the only thing that's relevant, an Asher tree is a hybrid. If you want to know if it's in the Shemitah year or not, you look at when it was blossomed. If you want to know what your miser it is, you look at the esrig when it was picked from the tree. You don't follow the rules of other trees when it comes to determine what year of miser it's in. You only focus on the year that the esrog is harvested, just like a vegetable, like the Gemara is going to explain on Hamad Aleph. Hamaitris mishtanois keseder hashon. Maitris, depending on what year it is, that will dictate what type of ma'aser one has to give. Shana Rishon so Shemitah is ma'aser Rishon v'sheni. V'chein b'shniya. Abba Shlish in the third year. It's ma'aser Rishon nu ma'aser Oni. And therefore, v'mchonat b'shniya. What if you have pears that blossomed in the second year, but the nilkat b'shlish, but weren't harvested until the third year? Bishari lama is every other tree, like an apple tree, kanata. You go basa kanata, and therefore you would take off ma'aser Rishon and ma'aser Sheni. But uva esrig acha lakita kiyarek. But an esrig, since you picked it from the tree in the third year, therefore you're going to be mafish ma'aser Rishon and ma'aser. Dr. Gemara Hasam Hakamash Malon. The time das linen bay acha lakita. You know why we go basa lakita lagavi ma'aseris? Once again, it's because of the derech eretz, the customs in the world of how the tree is treated. What is al kol moyim? It means it doesn't just rely on natural rain, rather shemashkin oisai b'mayim shuvim kiyer. You actually irrigate it, and you bring extra water in addition to what naturally occurs. The hainu time of the yerek kedama Rosh Hashanah. This is the reason why a yerek, we look at the year that it's harvested to determine what year it's in, because it says Gorin v'Yekev Tiv Gabi Meiser. The Torah uses the word Gorin and Yekev when it's discussing Meiser. Kidagon min Gorin. So we learn from here, Ma Gorin v'Yekev. Just like things that are stored in a Gorin and a Yekev, things like wheat, things like grain, miyuchadim shegdelim al roiv mayim. They require irrigation in addition to the natural rain. Roiv mayim is anu geshamim. And because of that, umis astrin achari ashana sha'avra, and therefore the miser is totally in the shana sha'avra. So I'm sorry, we're talking about grain. Grain is roiv mayim. I misspoke. Grain relies only on natural rain. Normally, grain does not have to be irrigated. The growth of grain relies on roiv mayim. And what year do we consider the year of grain? We don't look at when the grain was harvested. Rather, by grain, we look at when it grew a third. We don't look at the year that we harvested the grain. We look at the year that it grew a third. And we learned that from Psukim, that grain, you go basur, when it grew a third, not basur kita, so to any type of produce that grows without irrigation. And what are those? The hainu ilanois, such as trees, misashrin l'sha'avar. When you determine what year of miser it's in, you look at the year that it's fruit blossom. I guess fruit blossoming is comparable to grain growing a third. Even though miser for peris ha'ila is only midirabanan anyway, so how could you have a pasuk to tell you how you take off misers from a tree if, according to the Torah, you don't take off miser from fruit? Nevertheless, when the Rabbanon made their takanos, the Rabbanon made it fit in with the psukim. Yotu Yerakos, this excludes Yerakos, trees and grain, which are Gedel Nal Roiv Moyim. They follow the year that they blossomed or reached a third of their growth. But Yerakos, Shegedel Nal Kol Moyim, Yerakos need more water than just naturally occurring rain, rather they need irrigation as well. Mitzaser L'Shana Haba. The year that determines what year they are, Lemaiser, is the year of the harvest. And the esrog tree is a little bit of a hybrid. It has features that are similar to a tree, but when it comes to meiser, it's compared to a vegetable. Because I guess an esrog tree requires a lot more water than just naturally occurring rain. So now let's try another case on for size. Nan kvi. A kvi, there's a suffix if it's a chaya or a behema, or maybe it's a suffix chaya, suffix behema. It seems like it's a mixed breed because it's something that was artificially created. It was bred that way. And Moshe Stern once told me that kvi stands for koichi v'oitzim yodi, something that's man-made. So that's not kvi yesh by derachim shavel achaya. There are ways where a kvi is like a chaya, and Rashi says that means even the misafka lon, since we're not sure in nasal by lechumra, we'll go lechumra, and therefore, if there's a chumra in treating it like a chaya, we have to follow that chumra. And Rashi says, what is that chumra? A chaya requires kito adam. If you shech the behema, you don't have to cover up its blood. But if you shech the chaya, you have to cover its blood. Yet there are ways where you have to be machmer and treated like a behema, and that is Rashi's chel by aser. The chelev of a chaya is never aser. The chelev of a behema is aser. So we pass in the chumrah. You may not eat its chelev, that it might be a behema, but you must also make kisei adam because it might be a behema. The yesh boy drachim shava. I'm sorry, you have to make kisei adam because it's like a chaya, and you only have to make kisei adam and a chaya. And it has ways where it's similar to a chaya and a behema, and that is Rashi's ton shchita. A chaya and a behema both need shchita, so too does a kvi. And there are ways where it's different in halacha, both from a chaya and from a behema. And Rashi's other harva in behema v'chaya. It would be other to make it breed with a behema or a chaya because we don't know what it is. Zok the Gemara, why there did it say derachim? Why didn't it say devarim? This is devarim. The su, and we have another problem. Hadithnan zu achas min derachim teshavu gite nashim l'shechrui avodim. The Mishnah tells us later that when you bring a get or a start shechrur from Medina Tayam, either way you must say b'fani nechta, b'fani nechta. So this requirement that by Shechrur avodim, you also have to say b'fani nechtam. This is one way, one of the ways where there's a similarity between Gitei Noshim and Shechrur avodim. Nisni Devarim. Once again, why did it use the word Drachim? It should have used the word Devarim. And here you don't have those explanations that you had before. So because of that, we're aborting all of the svaros we said that this is Lashon Zachar and this is Lashon Nekeva. Forget about all that. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Oh, I apologize. The very big rhyme or reason. When it's not a clear-cut situation, it's a little bit like this, it's a little bit like that. For instance, the kfi that we just mentioned, it's a little bit like behemoth, it's a little bit like a chaya. It's not clear. Tani drachim, he uses the word derech. But when something's clear-cut, he uses the word davar. Tani dvarim. Dekanami, I can prove it to you. The katani seifa. The seifa of this very same brisa that's discussing a kvi, and in the Reisha it uses the word drachim. In the seifa, Rabbi Elazar Omer esrog shava le'ilan. I'm sorry, not by kvi. I apologize. By esrog. Esrog shava le'ilan l'chol davar. So in the beginning of the brisa it says esrog shava le'ilan b'shloisha drachim uli yerek v'derech echad. Why? Because it's not exactly like this or exactly like that. There's a palukta. So therefore it uses the word derech. But the same brisa uses the word davar. because that's according to Eliezer, who holds that it's clear cut. In Esher Geshavalila, the holdover, Shemamina. So too, in our Mishnah, where we're speaking about Kiddushin, it uses the word drachim because once again, by Kiddushin, it goes either way. So let's have a look. Rashi goes through the different prices and show why they use derech versus davar. Dika plukta, chiluk b'dracha b'derech zu doima lakan, u'b'derech zu any doima. In certain ways it's comparable to something, in certain ways not. That's when we use the word derech. Kagoyin masnitin like our Mishnah. The gimel drachim, in order, there's three ways to marry a woman, but lemute chuppah, the loikanya. But it uses derech because not everything works. These three things work. To marry a woman, chuppah doesn't. That's why I use the word derech. Udazov and azov as well. Hachihu to have oinis liziva. Only through these 7 ways does it illustrate that this was an oinis and he's not tamei, but not some other oinis that he might have done. So once again, since it's not clear cut, you use the word derech. Udigitin ve'elu shava v'loy baimer tnu get zel ishti or tashicher zel avdi the chayzer beget bein the chayzer beticher. It uses the derech when we're saying that it's that zu achas min hadrachim teshavu gitinashim l'shchur avadim. It's because gitinashim are only similar to shchur avadim in one way, in some ways, not in all ways. There are ways where they're very different. Because if you give a get, if you send a star shikhr with a shliach, he's kind of right away because it's a schus for an eved to go free, and the shliach will be kind on behalf of the eved because of zach and adam shleibapanav. But sending a woman to get is not a schus, and therefore she will not be milureshish till she receives the get. So since it goes both ways, and in one way it's comparable to A, and in another way it's comparable to B, we use the word drach. The only time we use davar is when it's clear cut. Will Elon the chol davar, like to say. We know it because it says at the end of the brayse of Esrog Shavalila the chol davar, he uses the word davar shmamina. Why is there a number? It must be making clear to us not to mistakenly include something else on the list. And as well, it also says why do we need numbers? The Gemara, only 3 ways to be kind of a woman. Chuppah would not work to be kind of a woman. According to Rafuna, will hold that a chuppah can be kind of through a kal which we'll see later in the Gemara. What is the 3 coming to be memai? Lamute chalipin. To be memai chalipin, that a woman cannot be nickness bechalipin. If a woman gives you a shmata, if you give a woman a shmata to pick up, you're not kind of her. It's not like chametz. It has to be a kinyan. I mean, the Gemara is going to talk about why. So I would have thought, since the mikar of kinyan kesef by kedusha isha is from stay Ephraim, you would have thought that if a field can be purchased with a kinyan chalipin, so too a woman can be nickness with kinyan chalipin. Kamash malan, that it's to read after these 3 and not chalipin. Frank Gemara be'ema hakanami. Maybe chalipin will work. How do you know chalipin won't work? The Gemara chalipin isnu the pachas mishavah. We know when you make a kinyan chalipin, the shmata that you pick up doesn't necessarily have to be worth a pruta. The isha of a pachas mishavah pruta loy mekanyan nafshet. No woman with any type of pride is going to allow herself to become married with less than a shavah pruta. Let's see Rashi. Chalipin is the pachas mishavah pruta. The kaimon beperkazov finding the flea aval pei shein shavah pruta. You can use the keli. I can give you a keli to pick up, and then I'll be kind of what you have, but you're going to sell me. And even though what I gave you is not worth a shavah pruta, but the reason why kinyan chalipin doesn't work is because no woman would accept it. Zok to Gemara, minyana the seifa l'mutimai. It says there's 2 ways for a woman to go free: get a misas abal What are we excluding? The Gemara Lamut Chalita. It tells us that Chalita would not be effective. It would not be an effective way of marrying up a woman. So Kedai the Chamina tasted the Kal V'Chomer Miyavama. I would have thought you could make a Kal V'Chomer from Yavama. My Yavama Sheni Yotze Beget. Yotze Bechalita. My Yavama that you cannot break the Zika with a get. Yet with Chalita you could break the Zika. Zusha Yotze Beget. A regular Isha who walks free if she receives a get. Einoi did. She Yotze Bechalita. Surely she should be able to go free with the Chalita. Kamash Malon. Break them off. Maybe in fact that she could go out with Chalita. Dr. Gemara, she cannot. We have a pasuk teaches us that she cannot. Amar Kra, Sefer Krisu. It teaches that Sefer Karsa, Dafka is safer like a get, will break a marriage, Vein Davar Acha Karsa, but no other method such as Chalitza will break up a marriage. Okay, let's stop here, and Bez Hashem, we will continue tomorrow. Shkoyach everybody for joining. Like David said, we need to be in Chazak the Olam. We usually have a big Olam at the beginning of Masechta, and it doesn't seem like a big Olam came today.
Yes, it was a safer crisis.